Hello, welcome back to another pen talk. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to continue on our exploration of pens from China with a pen you haven't seen me do recently. Hopefully that logo and that imprint is coming across. It's a black box. It does have your typical label here. We'll translate it and show you what it means. It's a nice hard cardboard sleeve that just slides off. The pen was in a plastic sleeve. I bought this from Bobby on Etsy. So I don't know whether this is normally included, but he threw this in, and I think it's very nice because the pen is impressive. I got some nice sunlight coming in, so I'm hoping that's going to really let this opal finish come through in shining colors, depth. There's just every color you can think of in there, at least most colors. A very nice metal in the top of the cap that has a similar type of design element as we saw on the box. An ornate cap band. Just a standard clip, nothing fancy, functional. Nothing at the bottom of the barrel. You have a metal ring here. The sun has come out now in quite full intensity. We had a fair amount of snow last night, so the shoveling's done. So I'm glad I had an opportunity to get some sunlight. It's an unscrew cap, about 1 1/4 turns, and we see that number 6 Schmidt nib, which seems to be showing up on a lot of recent Chinese pens. The section's the same material as the pen, which I always enjoy. You know, the pen fits well in the hand. It's fairly light. You know, the sun is really playing on this resin quite well. So I really appreciate how that brings it out. You know, nothing like sunlight, at least in my experience, to really shine. And your standard unscrew here, you know, there's a metal piece here, which is always nice. That leads to stability. You know, this is that K1 Schmidt converter, I think. No labeling on it, but it's the most simplest basic design. It works fine, which is all that matters. It draws up ink and lets you write. So I just wanted to let you appreciate the colors that are shining through from the sun. And we'll try to get a shot that I can use for my intro shot. There we go. There's my intro shot. Took me a while to orient everything and to let the light really reflect off and refract off of that amazing resin. Well, I always clean my pens, new, old. I just think it's good to flush, and most of the pen people I know flush too. Their pens, their nibs, their feeds. So this is that same nib that we saw on the M600. And this larger Schmidt nib does not fit into the other Moonman pens because of this diameter here is about 1 millimeter wider, so it doesn't fit into those sections. The threads at the end are the same. So no matter what Schmidt nib unit you get, the threads are the same, but this body obviously has to be bigger to accommodate the larger nib. You know, it has the same design where the converter just plugs into there. You know, this is the low-end converter, no metal bits on it. You know, no special soft resins at the end. It'll probably last long enough. What I found a little bit odd, as things go awry, is that this assembly, which holds in the unit, comes right out. So there's where the threading is that accepts that Bach nib unit. And I have my challenges over the camera. So I've never seen this type of setup. Normally, if there's a metal insert, it's glued in place or it's part of the section. But in this case, they've done something which I would say is a cost-cutting measure. I don't know of any engineering reason for it. Everything screws together nicely, and if you just saw this without removing the nib unit, you wouldn't think anything of it. You think this is that classic, you know, metal piece that usually reinforces the section and gives some stability to it. But in this case, it just is a kind of a collar there that's loose. So that's it. Just wanted to show you that. So in case you do pull out the nib unit, don't lose this little metal collar because it will be loose. As you'll see further on in the video, parts of this pen come apart. You saw how the nib unit was screwed into that metal collar. So I decided to see how the cap came apart. And obviously we have your basic folded clip, pretty substantial, and that fits right on top of the cap. And then in there goes this finial, and then this little emblem is actually the screw that goes into this brass piece, which is inside the cap. And that's how the whole thing is held together. You can see there's notches in there, which we've seen in another pen. So that's basically how that works. And it didn't take any pressure to take it apart. So we're going to put it back together again. But it does make, in case you get any ink in the cap, easy to clean out. As we can look inside the cap, there's no cap liner. Let's see what the LED light shows. Pretty consistent resin. I also find this to be interesting, to show off that interesting resin. I use interesting a lot. I mean, this is a fairly thick machining that they did here, so this pen does have that substantial feel to it. So that's one of the things that they did do nicely. But I would be a little concerned about that nib drying out the way this is put together. This pen is available both on Etsy, sold by Chinese Pen, and also on eBay. It comes in a lot of colors. Some of the postings and auctions call it celluloid. Some refer to it as the mountain pen. The name Xixia, as far as I can tell, is an area in northwestern China. But, you know, if you're interested in this pen, I suggest you do a lot of shopping. The price is pretty consistent among the different sellers, of somewhere between 75 and 80 US dollars. So it's certainly on the high side, and I think it's the most money I've spent for a Chinese pen. So the obvious pen to compare the Live in U is the Moonman pen, the M600. Interesting that both of these came out at the same period of time. And here, just for reference, is an M800. So you can see that they're all about the same length. They're all very similar in girth. So this is, I would say, the large pen variety, not the oversized or not a very large, but just large. A lot of similarities here, you know, clip, you know, a band around the top of the cap, various types of cap bands, and a gold band at the bottom. So again, to me, classic design elements of this type of flat top pen. As we delved in and we looked at the M600, how that replicates the original Parker dual fold design from the 20s. So, you know, I always try to look back from a historical perspective, and also keep in mind is there's only so much changes you can do to a pen and its design and its dimensions before it goes from being a writing instrument to something else, a work of art, something to admire, but holding it in your hand and putting ink on paper may not be its primary purpose. So I think this design lends itself to that primary purpose of putting ink on paper. When we post these, some interesting design elements come into play. Number one, the M600 is a very long pen posted. It doesn't post very deeply. It posts securely, but like the dual fold design, it doesn't lend itself, from my perspective, to posting. The M800 has always been a postable pen. The whole Sovereign series from Pelican are well designed from a writing perspective. But they did something interesting. The LIY pen is actually designed to post, and it posts fairly deeply, and as you can see, the length is a little bit longer than the M800 but shorter than the M600. The other thing you'll notice as we zoom in on the business end is there's no bands, metal bands that show on the section, which is typical of pens of this price range. You know, the M800 has your one gold band at the bottom, and of course the M600 has these two gold bands. When we took this pen apart, we saw that there was that metal insert, which was used to screw in the Schmidt nib unit. So one may look at this design as being very clean, certainly varying a little bit from that classic dual fold design. And the nibs are all those, you know, fairly large number 6 nibs. Here the Pelican really shines because you got an 18-karat gold nib. This is a early version of the M800 made in West Germany. And these are just those Schmidt fine nibs, which are a good size, but certainly not the best looking nib I've ever seen. It's just more functional. And as we go into the writing sample, you also see some interesting things from my experiences. The ink choice was an easy one for me. Sometimes they're easy. This is an ink I've enjoyed in some other pens. I just think it has that nice color that goes well with the LIY mountain pen. We're going to call it the mountain pen. You know, it's just a nice green blue ink. A little bit more on the blue side than some of my other teals, and the chromatography is just very nice. You got that intense blue, some green, and then some lighter blue there. So let's see how it works in the nib. So one of the things that I will say, this acrylic is just extremely interesting. I don't have anything else like it. This pen has some good weight to it. We'll show you those weights. It's just a few grams less than the M600. So that's another thing that puts it in that large pen category. I'd say weight more than 25 grams is a good weight to have in a pen of this size. The cap comes off, you know, with a little bit more than one turn. And I have no problem using this pen unposted. As I mentioned and showed when I did my comparison, this is designed to post. I mean, that is secure as post as anything. And you can feel the weight of the cap, and it does change the balance of the pen. That cap is pretty heavy relative to the weight of the pen. So even though it does post nicely, and it really takes some effort to get it off. And not only, wow, I didn't notice that. So That end piece does unscrew, but it's not meant to, because there's that little ring that just comes right off. So let me put this pen back together off camera, and we've just discovered something else about the design, kind of like that metal ring inside. Not what I would consider to be the best design. Well, I replaced that finial at the back of the barrel, but just keep in mind that it does unscrew, and I don't think that's something that they want you to do, because that gold ring just can be easily lost. So we're going to write with this unposted. I mean, this is, I'd say it's labeled a fine, but I'd say it's really closer to an extra fine. It's relatively smooth, and I haven't done anything to this nib. As you can see, a little bit of pressure increases flow and opens it up to almost like a medium, but it's not a pen you want to do that with on a regular basis. Just doesn't feel good. It's not a flexy nib. But as you can see, you can lay down a really fine line. So if that's something you'd like, then this nib right out of the box works well. As far as wetness goes, it's not that wet of a pen. But as we put down some pressure, it's much wetter. So again, I've had my challenges with these Schmidt nibs, and this one is no exception. So let's rate this pen. This is a tough one. I'm going to give it a 9.1. And this nib does what it's supposed to do, even though it's not a nib that I would like. The pen is extremely well made, even with the little bits that come apart, and it's not really meant to be played around with. The other thing I noticed is when I filled it, ink got around that metal collar on the nib unit. Most of it's come out, but there's still a little blog there. So with this kind of semi-transparent resin, you do see those things. I do like this ink in this pen. I think it works well, and I think it really complements the pen. But let's compare it to another fine Schmidt nib. So this is that Moonman M600. And it's also a fine Schmidt nib. And it's the same size in the same nib unit as in the LIY pen, but this nib I've worked on. It is much smoother, and as you can see, lays down a wider line than the fine that's in there. This ink is a little darker, so hopefully you can still see that difference even though the color is not the same. I mean, you can lay down a fine line with this if you want, with no pressure. But with normal writing pressure, it opens up a little bit, and it certainly lays down a lot of ink that I like. So these two pens are very, very similar. If you're going to ask me to choose one, I'd have to say it's the M600. It is, depending upon where you buy it, on Etsy it's about $20 less. So I think you need to take that into perspective. These are equally well made, but you know, there's some little weird issues with the LIY pen that I find just strange. Something certainly that you can live with. And that resin is impressive, but so is the resin in the M600. So, you know, they're not the same per se, but they're close enough. The engraving around this cap band doesn't really do much for me. I like these nice, simple, functional cap bands here on the M600. So that's my suggestion. I may have rated this LIY pen higher than the M600, but you know, that's not taking into account exactly pricing or some of the other features that may weigh in there. So we've reached the end of this video. Hopefully you found it interesting and enjoyable. So thank you for watching. May you have many great writing experiences, explore this great world of pens and inks and nibs, and enjoy what they bring you. So there's the end of this video. As you can see, it gets a really fine line. So we're going to say bye for now, until we meet again. Enjoy your day, enjoy your life.